fine. You can have my coat too, Jack. So this morning I wanted to just speak a little bit about New Year's and intention, and just in the context too of our dear friend and teacher Ram Dass having passed away last week, actually almost exactly a week, about I think maybe around 2:30 in the afternoon Hawaii time on Sunday last week, and I wrote about that in the newsletter. How many of you see our newsletter? And okay, almost lots of people. But one of the most powerful teachings when somebody dies, or to use a euphemism, passes away, is this sense of how can there be nobody when there was somebody there? How can they be gone? It's like when you witness a birth. How can this baby appear seemingly out of nowhere and out of nothing? Although we do know how babies are made and how they grow, it's still just the most miraculous, strange thing to witness a birth. And it's sort of the same thing when somebody dies. There's a tremendously heightened sense of what is this and who are we? And all of our ideas about who we are and what our life is, they really go down the drain when we have a huge loss of someone we love, or even in our case, Ram Dass was not a family member, but it felt like our spiritual family and somebody very important to us. And yesterday or the day before in the mail, there's so little of the mail that I actually want to receive. But there was, I guess it's a magazine if you belong to AAA. They send you a magazine. And on this magazine was a story about the Four Corners. And if you've ever driven in the Southwest, when you drive far, like it's a long way to drive, say, from New Mexico to LA, and there's a place where 4 states come together, and it's Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. And so this sort of quadrupoint where the corners meet, it also marks the boundary between 2 Native American governments, the Navajo Nation and the Ute, the Ute Mountain Tribe Reservation. So you're driving across the country through this stunning wilderness of mesas and rock formations and cacti, and it's almost like an ocean of just vastness, and you start to see signs saying 4 corners. And it's like that New Yorker cartoon, the sign by the road that says your own tedious thoughts the next 200 miles. It's kind of like that, long distance driving through these areas. And so the signs that start to pop up catch your attention. And even though maybe you hadn't intended to stop there, you get excited. Oh, 4 corners, it's coming soon and I'm going to go there. And then you get there, big billboards, and you get there and you're kind of excited and you pull into the parking lot. And guess what? There's a bronze plaque and it says 4 Corners National Monument. That's it. Maybe a restroom. I mean, there's nothing there. It's the same rugged, empty, bleak, fantastic landscape you've been driving through, miles and miles and miles the whole way. It's exactly the same. 4 Corners is an idea. It's an idea in the emptiness of the wilderness. It's just heaps of sandstone, and it's beautiful. The mountains are beautiful, but they're the same beauty you've been driving through for hundreds and hundreds of miles before. And I often feel that New Year's is like that. It's like it's New Year's. It's New Year's. We get excited. It's in the air, culture. See you next year. It's so fun to say that when we're going to see them in a few days. See you next year. It's the same stream of time and life that we've been in all year long, right? Day after day. The calendar is like this. It's demarcation of, of a calendar. It's a conceptual calendar demarcation. And yes, it's rich with possibilities despite our fears. But it is the same life and the same landscape. But we use the occasion of New Year's to set intentions and to reflect on the past year and how was it and what would I like to happen this next year and how can I, how can I have something to do with that? And who we are is really revealed more by our actions than the way we may advertise ourselves. And I love this. There's a saying, we always thought it was the Buddha, but I looked it up in fake Buddha quotes. It isn't the Buddha. And by the way, that's a fantastic website if you want to have some laughs. But it's very erudite and scholarly too. It says, watch the thought and its ways with care. This is the end of it. May they spring from love born of compassion for all beings. It's like the thought leads to the deed, becomes a habit. The habits harden into character. So watch the thoughts and its ways with care and let them spring from loving awareness. And so we want to actually do a ritual of setting some intention today. And you know that expression, the road to hell is paved with good intentions? Like, I've always wondered what that exactly means. Like, what does it mean? If we have good intentions, we're going to wind up in hell. Is it the hell of realizing we didn't live into our good intentions? Is it the hell of guilt and disappointment? Like, I don't know exactly what that hell is. But I read this monk who said, actually, the road to hell is not paved with good intentions. It's paved with intentions whose motivations we don't understand. And that made a lot more sense to me, that we wind up in hell instead of somewhere good because the intentions that we thought were good may actually not be so wise or good. And the Buddha, during the period of time when he was actually a single dad, they lived in community, to his son Rahula, gave him a teaching about his intention. He said, look, it may seem like a good idea at the time, but check and see what is your actual intention. And then when you decide to do whatever you're going to do, check in while you're doing it and see, okay, it seemed like a good idea. Does it still seem like a good idea? How's it going? And then after you do it, check in again. Did it have the result I intended? Did it lead me where I wanted to go? And then a few months later down the line, check in again. I would say, if we were being really scrupulous, a few years later, because even things that seemed okay at the time, sometimes later, we have learned more, we're more conscious, and they kind of don't anymore. So he told Rahula, he called it appropriate attention, the ability to ask the right questions. And he felt that, the Buddha felt that the ability to ask the right questions was actually way more important than having the right answers. And that's very encouraging for us. I don't have the answers, but I often know the questions by now in life. And he said, use your actions as a mirror to reflect where you're at in your life. Because, what we do and how we act it's a clue about the state of our minds and the state of our hearts. This morning I walked in and I was feeling so appreciative of the InsightLA team who are here during the holidays and all of, all of you who've come here to practice together during the holidays, but especially the ones who are coming here to work. And in spite of this feeling of, gratitude and appreciation, I immediately saw like some messy stuff by the Buddha. I'm just like, what's all this messy stuff by the Buddha? And my mood changed, just instantly into kind of annoyance. And then I realized, well, actually, I haven't taught people that it's important to leave space around the Buddha. And being humans, our clutter, at least being Western American humans, our clutter, it metastasizes. Have you noticed? It just grows. I have to spend hours each week, with stuff, putting it away and getting rid of it, and just taking care of stuff. And so, anyway, I think we can understand that our mindfulness practice, our ability to stay present, helps us actually stay with the intention we have, so that we don't walk up the stairs intending to greet and appreciate everybody and instead complain about the messy shelf. Do you see what I mean? That's a tiny example, but these tiny examples are mostly what our life is actually made of. So when we're considering doing something, we can ask ourselves, is this going to have good results for me and for others? Is this what I really want in my life or want for you? And so that I want to be sure that we have time for everything, and that Jack gets a chance to say some things too. And Jack is going to lead our ritual, right?
Thank you, Trudy.
You're welcome, Jack.
Like Trudy, I want to reflect a little bit about Ram Dass to start with. Because we had the good fortune of teaching with him a few weeks ago and spending time. And I knew him for 48 years and all kinds of roles as a mentor and a friend and a collaborator and all kinds of other things. And I'd go out in public with him at different times. We'd go have, lunch at the restaurant or things like that. And people would come up to him wherever we went, pretty much, and they'd find him with a kind of urgency and say, Ram Dass, I read Be Here Now when I was 16, or I heard you talk, you changed my life. And it happened over and over again. What does it mean when somebody changes your life like that? And part of what was beautiful about being with Ram Dass and watching him also kind of receive and work with the people who came to see him is that he had this vast perspective, like the Utah, Four Corners, New Mexico landscape. A kind of combination of detachment or vastness and love at the same time. So people would come and say, I just lost a child, or I just made $1 billion, or I just whatever. They had their drama of their life. And he would look at them with so much love and say, yeah, that's an interesting dance you're in, isn't it? That's an interesting part of your incarnation. And there was a perspective that was so much bigger than the small story we tend to get locked into about what's good and what's bad and what should and shouldn't happen in our lives. And instead it was like a gateway through the heart into a place of vast time and space, eternity really, and love, reminding you that who you really are is not just limited to the personality or the particular drama that you're living out at this time in your life. You are consciousness itself. You're loving awareness, as Trudy was saying in the meditation. that was born into your body, that will leave it, and that actually is all things. You are consciousness waking up in the form of this particular life you have. So when we sit in meditation, yes, there's ways to quiet the mind, open the heart, tend our care for things, and there are all these teachings that remind us how to do that. But the most important thing isn't so much to have some particular experience, but to be able to get quiet enough that we can step outside of our thoughts and our dramas and the praise and blame and gain and loss and joy and sorrow and pleasure and pain, the duality that makes up our human incarnation, and say, wow, look at where we are now, what matters? And when you get quiet and you listen to what matters, the intention gets clear, the care gets clear. In the midst of it all, what matters is usually very simple. Did I love well? Am I offering myself to life in some full way? The inner intentions become clearer. One of the things that's beautiful about meditation, and was so true around Ram Dass, is that there's a big sense of trust. And I know it working individually with people. People will come to see Trudy on High over the decades and be going through all kinds of, at the worst, inner suffering and angst and difficulty in themselves and in their lives. And maybe part of the most important dance that we did together was a reminder, you can do this. Your heart is big enough to hold all this. That born in you was the great heart of compassion. Who you are is consciousness going through this human incarnation and experience. Remember who you really are. Remember the luminosity that was born in you, the light that was born in you. Who you really are. Remember this vastness. So we have at this time a kind of failure of imagination in our culture. Things get very narrow, and there's all the political and news feeds that you get, in the social news feeds, that are mostly trying to scare you. You may have noticed that. And it's not that there aren't these very big mostly human-caused problems, but there's something bigger. I remember when there was a forest fire near where I was living in Marin County, in Point Reyes National Seashore, a very big forest fire, burned a big part of the park. And you probably had this experience. I went a year later and there were all these green shoots that had come up. I went 2 years later and I could hardly tell there was a fire. There were a few burned trees, but the earth wants to renew itself. The line from the poet Pablo Neruda, he writes, you can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. And those words of wisdom from Martin Luther King, where he says the moral arc of the universe may be long, but it bends toward justice. There is something in us and in the earth itself that renews itself with all it needs is a little bit of space, and the forest wants to come back. And the earth wants to renew itself, and life does in all these forms, including in the form that you are. And to meditate, then, to quiet yourself, is to step out of the daily thought structures and begin to trust that there's something that you're here to express, which is your love, your creativity, your sense of connection with life itself, with the vastness of it. That's what happened when people would go to see Ram Dass with their small self problems, and he would gaze at them with this, in India it's called the glance of mercy. It's the eyes of so much love that people just begin to, they get taken aback, or they begin to weep, as they did in the last week we spent with Ramdas, to be seen in that way and go, oh yeah, I was caught in stuff, wasn't I? But who I am is really so much bigger, is love itself, is awareness itself. What will I do with this? And then you don't have some sort of moralistic thing of, I'm supposed to do this. But if you listen deeply, it's because it's who you are. And the beautiful intentions that you might make, this is not just the beginning of a new year, it's the beginning of a new decade. You know, what happened to the 2010s? They are gone, right? They're back with the pyramids and the dinosaurs. They're just back into the void. And now life is going to give you the 20s. Whatever the hell they'll be, right? Whoa, a whole new decade coming. And even though it's a construct, it's an invitation in a certain way to this mystery to say, all right, life will renew itself, and what seeds do I want to plant? What really matters to me? And can I trust in myself and in this beautiful earth that I can align myself with this, with the beauty that life is underneath it all, in spite of the kind of difficulties that we also have to tend to.
So, thank you, Jack. So now it's your turn. We can have some conversation together. We have some time for any questions about your meditation practice, or how you're applying the principles of the practice in your life, or anything you'd like to share. You don't have to give a talk. You can just ask anything that you came here wondering about. In fact, it's a kindness to others when you ask a question and don't give a talk. Because when you ask a question, that generosity of being vulnerable and asking, you know there's somebody else in the room who will be touched by either that same question or what they hear in what you hear in response. Wait for the mic, because that way whoever's on the can hear you.
Thank you very much, both of you. I'm coming here with a lot of pain and sadness, because some very unfortunate words were said between me and my partner this morning.
I'm sorry.
I feel like some irreparable damage was done, a lot of harsh and slanderous speech on both our ends. And to the point where I'm now have been threatened to go to court and threatened to have to move out. And I'm wondering what the next step, what your suggestion would be as a next step to moving towards repairing, if possible, this very important relationship in my life.
Wow, thank you. It's really difficult when we're angry to remember that words can be so relationship shredding. And in the heat of anger, they're so easy to say, and they just come to us so readily. And then, then the repair, if there can be. Obviously, I don't know you, and I don't know your relationship, but just your wish, the fact that you came here and you sat with yourself, even though you were boiling and roiling and with all the agitation that comes from a big fight like that. The fact that you came here and meditated, that is the hugest important first step, because you got to sit with yourself. I'm sure you reviewed what happened, because the mind does that anyway. we resonate with wherever we've been, which is why it's important to decide where we've been and where we want to be. Decide where we want to be, I mean. So you sat with that, and you, whatever you were feeling inside, your body sat still and was patient, and you emerged from the meditation realizing you actually want to repair this. And so you've already taken the most huge first step, which was to be honest with yourself, to sit with the unpleasantness, to put it mildly, of what happened, the sadness, the pain, the hurt, the shame, all of it. And the fact that you want to repair and are in this place of genuine and sincere, it feels like remorse on your side. Yeah, but that's pretty irresistible to, if you can bring yourself to share it with in that spirit, like just as you are right now. Your heart's so open and so vulnerable and so willing, really, to try to make some amends. And your partner has also, they've had time alone too while you were here. Do you have kids?
He has a daughter.
So they've had time alone. If they're children, the time alone hasn't been as reflective, probably, as your time alone meditating has been. So I don't know what energy you would be met with when you get home. But that sincere wish and the offering of yourself, like Jack was saying, just the offering of yourself in humility and love. I can't imagine a better way to go home than in that spirit. But I would have to caution you, you may not be met with open arms, because you've been here meditating, and now you've had the support, or you will have had, of all of us rooting for you. And maybe he's been home with a kid. Do you know what I'm saying? Not having really time to reflect, but having to kind of zip it up for her and do what parents do. So it may require some patience on your part and some willingness to stay with the feeling of caring and remorse, even though he may, or she may, or they may say things that make you mad again. Do you see what I mean? They may say things because they're still mad to push you away. And your steadiness, your ability to be steady and present and not take it personally, just for a few hours. I'm not talking about, months and months and months of this, but at least a few hours or maybe a few days to just keep meditating, keep sort of dipping into the well of loving awareness for yourself and for the situation. I think it's inevitable that will have an effect. It's the best you can do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you've already taken at least the first 2 steps.
This is maybe a little bit along those lines, but my husband, after a lifetime of search, located his birth father. He was adopted recently through 23andMe, and it's a rabbit hole that he knowingly went down, but now he's being rejected or just blocked off by this man who's his birth father. And he is really just emotionally torn up about this. And what would you say to somebody who finds themselves in that, he's 65 years old and he's found this man who's alive at 95.
Wow.
He's not going to be around much longer. And all these years, they're both from Minnesota. All these years, his birth father's been living in San Luis Obispo as a professor at Cal Poly.
Oh, that gives me shivers.
I know. It's hard to even get my mind around this. But he's hitting this wall What would you say to my husband?
This isn't going to be solved on the level of my father at 95 now saying, I'm sorry, I abandoned you or whatever. It sounds like that's not what's going to happen. And so your husband in some way is forced both to feel somewhere really deep in himself the sense of loss and longing of not having been raised by the parents that initially gave him birth, which is actually true for an awful lot of people on this planet. I mean, there's lots who were raised by their parents, but there's also orphans and adoptees. There's by the hundreds of millions, and it's painful. So he's sort of dealing with that, and in it, he's looking for something else. He's looking for home. He's looking for a place to feel like, I do belong. I am loved. Did he have a good life? Has your husband had a good life? Has he been loved?
Yes, he was adopted by very loving parents, put him through Yale, and treated him beautifully. But he wasn't adopted until the age of 1, so he was in and out of foster care, and
so those are really primal wounds that he carries. And the point isn't so much that his 95-year-old father, who won't even acknowledge him, is going to heal those wounds. This becomes the place where he finally has to do it himself. Do it with you who love him, to hold that. This is the place for self-compassion, for him to remember that there was a boy that was 6 months or 1 year old that didn't know who loved him.
Right.
And finally, it's time to realize that he can be that.
He can love that boy.
He can hold that
the boy within him,
within himself, exactly, because that's really what's driving all of this.
Right.
And you can love that boy in him, but he can feel it, that this is what he's longing for. And in some way, we're all longing for that.
Right.
Almost all of us as children were like, wait, how did I get into this? How do I get through this?
Right.
And so he's hit it. And in some way, it's part of his deepest life work to be able to realize that he's worthy of love, that he can love himself fully and honor that little boy and say, you're supposed to be here. We're going to have a hell of a good life, even in spite of all this.
Right.
And I love you.
Okay. I get that. Thank you.
Now we have to do our ritual.
Time for a ritual? We have a couple more minutes, as you wish. Okay?
Yeah, please.
All right. So, I'd like to invite us to do this ritual, for those who wish, completely optional, of creating what are called blessing chords. And if someone would help just spread these around the room a bit. People can take one and then pass a clump on to other people. Again, this is completely optional. And while these get passed around, I'll talk a little bit about them. And really about what Trudy was saying, of setting intention. It turns out that intention is one of the most powerful things in our human consciousness. It sets the direction of the heart. And so when you're in conflict with someone that you love, as you are, and you get all heated up, one of the most helpful things that you can do, as soon as you remember, is to take a breath, to step away for a moment, and then ask yourself, what's my best intention? What's my highest intention? And if you get quiet even for a moment, you realize, well, my best intention, which I heard in your voice, is to repair or to express love or to find a way to make this work. And it changes your whole tone of voice. It changes the way you carry your body. Oh, in the end, this is really what matters. That's a kind of short-term intention. Long-term intention in Buddhist tradition, for example, are the kind of vows of service and care for the world. The Bodhisattva takes sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. That's a kind of Zen form of chanting. But as I like to say, the problem is that when you go home, the sentient beings close to you don't want to be saved by you, right? So it has to have another meaning. And the meaning really is that it sets the direction of your heart. That no matter what happens, I vow to be an expression of love or care for myself and all beings. I mean, you could make the vow as simple as I vow to be kind. Or it could be something else that really comes out of your heart. As poet Diane Ackerman has written, in the name of daybreak and the eyelids of morning and the wayfaring moon and the night when it departs, I swear I will not dishonor my soul with hatred, but offer myself humbly as a guardian of nature, a messenger of wonder, an architect of peace, and a healer of misery. This is sort of her poetic expression of this is what I want to dedicate myself to. So to make these blessing chords, I'd like you to close your eyes. And on this day, in the winter of 2019, with the solstice just past and the sun beginning to return day by day, bit by bit, you are invited to reflect on what would your vow or intention be for, let's say, the next decade or so. How do you want to set the compass of your heart? Now let your eyes open gently. And if you're willing, turn to a person next to you without any conversation and listen to their vow or their intention, and then share yours. No other conversation, but just quietly listen. It's a conversation that we would rarely have with another person. But try it. Do that. And notice what it's like. All right, without conversation, that Just listening. How was that?
Did anybody not have somebody to talk to that would have?
That wanted
Because
to?
you could still, it only takes 2 seconds, or well, a few, to do it. Michael, did you have somebody? Oh, you did, okay. Okay.
All right. It's not our normal conversation, is it? And there's something kind of beautiful in the Sufi tradition. It's called the sohbet. It's the conversation of one heart to another. All right, so now hold up your blessing cord. And the color of this cord is considered to be one thread from the robe of a monk or a nun. So if you choose to wear it, as some people might, again, it's all quite optional, it's a way of remembering that your real garments and your real home is in the temple, is in the place that you consider sacred, and you carry this into the marketplace. So you hold your cord, and you remember now the intention or the vow or the direction you want to set for your heart. And as you sense it, then tie a knot in the cord, which is a reminder to carry this in the days and weeks and months and years ahead. And then one more knot as you hold your cord and reflect from the space of care or compassion or understanding, which is a prayer that you have or a wish for this world that we live in. And this too gets woven into your intentions. For you can add your part to make this come true. Tie the second knot into the cord. And now your blessing cord is activated. And if you do want to wear it, wrap it around your wrist a couple times. And then turn to the person sitting next to you and staying silent, a kind of silent blessing. Tie it onto them and let them tie it onto you. Find someone. This is all your Girl Scout, Boy Scout training coming to fruition. It's beautiful to see you all carrying the intentions and the prayers you have out into the world.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This really is the last time I'll see you this year. And that we will see each other next year is a wonderful thing. May it be so. And at the end of the year, it crossed my mind that I haven't done that. I was going to ask you for your donations, and you haven't done your end of the year donations yet. You have 2 days. But this, we do have until the 31st, I guess at midnight, to support the things that we care about supporting and share some of what we have with the rest of the world. And if you value the time that you spend here, and that there are places like this in the world where we can come and just sit, and I mean, the sitting groups, you don't even have to sign up for a class and make that commitment. You can just drop in when you are able to. And knowing too that we have people sitting in Big Bear at the New Year retreat, meditating right now, part of our community. And I don't know about you, but it's very helpful to me in my practice to know that there are people, other places, who are meditating, who are working with themselves, who are really forming the wisest and most loving intentions for the earth, for each other, for our own lives. It's encouraging. It's encouraging. It's worth supporting, because in our culture, this is not so well supported, this sort of thing. And everything really in our education and our conditioning is to do stuff and accomplish things and be busy. And it's easy to transfer that into our spiritual life. But actually, we come here not to have to do that. And then yet, there is this rent that is so sky high to have a place where we sit and do nothing. It's sort of crazy, but that's how it is, and it needs support. So I want to remind you to please support things like this and InsightLA, and to do it whatever way works best for you, whether it's being a monthly donor, whether it's volunteering. You can see Edward if you would like to volunteer. Edward's there. Just any way that you would like to be part of the community and support us, we will be very happy and grateful. So with that, I want to wish you all a really happy New Year. Are we having a New Year sit this year? I haven't seen anything about that. This would be the first year in 17 years that I guess we're not. Yeah, I didn't see anything about it. But I also didn't scroll all the way down to the end of the newsletter this week. Okay. And I did write about Ram Dass in the newsletter this week. So they're always posted on my website, which I never look on, but I know they're there because Jean Ritchie, who is here this morning, Jean Ritchie, will you raise your hand? Jean helps make sure our things are posted, and there's actually something on my website, which is trudygoodman.com, I think, right? Yeah. So you can always find them there. And I'm going to be, by the way, there was some misunderstanding. Jack and I are taking a sabbatical from teaching retreats this coming year. It doesn't mean that I won't be teaching Sunday mornings. It doesn't mean that I won't be doing other teaching, and same for Jack. Somebody was just like, oh, you're taking a year of sabbatical. It's like, not quite. We're just taking a sabbatical from teaching the long retreats, and that's because we have other projects that we really need to give ourselves time to do, because this is our 75th year, you guys. I'm just thinking of that 95-year-old dad, and I'd like to soften his heart a little. You better hurry, right? But the main thing is what Jack said, that your husband understand that really that terrible heartbreak is not coming from his 65-year-old self at all, So whatever heartbreak that we have and carry with us, because we all do, may we hold it tenderly and with self-compassion, and make room by our willingness to feel that heartbreak and heartache, whether it's for ourselves or our world. We also open ourselves to the joy and to feeling fully the joy of being alive. As Ram Dass used to say when he would get in the ocean and would all go out and swim with him, it's a fantastic sight. In fact, I have a little video. I'll send it out. maybe with the next newsletter. It just shows this whole group of people rising and falling with the waves out there with him. And somebody would usually bring a plastic bag full of blossoms and throw the blossoms. And then he just, he wears a vest because he can't really swim because one side doesn't move. And he would just lean back and go, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. And everybody does it together then. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh joy, oh joy, oh joy, oh joy. And then everybody chants that together. And then, I'll leave you with this. The minister of fun starts the chant. The first 2 lines are what I remember. If it's not fun, don't do it. And if you have to do it, make it fun. So, Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon.